So, if you recall, yesterday I spoke about the meeting in Davos, where basically a bunch of billionaires come together, and I spoke about how they were asked about AOC, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez's plan, her proposal for a 70% top marginal tax rate, which applies to money made post 10 million. So if you make 10 million in $1, that $1 is going to be taxed at 70%. Now, this has set up obviously quite a debate in the United States. And one thing quickly I want to mention also that I covered yesterday, I want to give a little bit more detail on. So I talked yesterday about Sean Hannity and how he was doing his dumb, Venezuela nonsense. And what I said was, you're probably not even making 10 million a year. But people were saying that he makes like 38 million a year. So I want to be clear for the people who saw that segment, okay, he is making over 10 million a year, and that's the reason why he's afraid, is because he doesn't want to have his money taken. So I wanted to add that. But I spoke about the exchange that happened between the founder of Dell and the professor. I guess he's the MIT director of their initiative for the digital economy. I believe he's a professor. His name's Eric, and it's with a K, not with the C. And I spoke about how basically the room erupts into laughter. Everyone starts laughing at AOC's proposal. And then, the Dell founder goes, oh, well, now, I think it's better for me to distribute from my foundation rather than giving it to the government. And also that he goes on to say, oh, well, in what nation has that worked? So I'm doing this because we actually have video footage of this now, and I think it's quite telling. There are a few things that I want to talk about, one of them being that this is a massive clapback, and the other one being that the moderator is really stupid. Go ahead and check this out.
There are growing calls to address these inequalities, particularly the wage inequality, with more taxes. In particular, in the United States, there's been a call by Congresswoman Ocasio-Cortez to tax people earning over 10 million at a 70% tax rate. The current top rate in the United States is 37%. Michael Dell, do you support this?
I just want to say I'm thrilled that they're asking.
Wow, what a great question. Well, look, I mean, my wife and I set up a foundation about 20 years ago, and we would have contributed quite a bit more than a 70% tax rate on my income, on my annual income. And I feel much more comfortable with our ability as a private foundation to allocate those funds than I do giving them to the government.
All right.
So no, I'm not supportive of that.
Well, Keith.
And I don't think it would help the growth of the U.S. economy.
Oh, that's interesting. And can you say a little bit more about why? Why you don't think it would?
Well, name a country where that's worked, ever.
United States.
Briefly, in the 80s.
No. From about the 1930s through about the 1960s, the tax rate averaged about 70%. At times it was up as high as 95%. And those were actually pretty good years for growth. So I don't have a strong opinion on that proposal. A lot of the devil is in the details. But I think there's actually a lot of economics that suggests that it's not necessarily going to hurt growth.
Yeah, so that was a pretty intense clapback that you guys just saw it right there for sure. Because obviously, so first of all, I want to say actually, there's a lot of things to say about this. So first of all, the crowd laughing at the proposal is really telling, because it's like these people are super out of touch and they don't understand what's going on in the real world. They don't know what's going on with normal people. Forget even like poor, even middle class people. These guys are swimming in money. They don't have any of those worries. The money has been distributed in their favor. Now, the thing that is problematic, this moderator is horrible. She has no clue what she's talking about. She literally doesn't know what she's talking about. And it really pained me to watch this really hard, because first, she sets it up incorrectly. The premise is wrong. at least from the way she phrased it. What she said is, oh, well, if you make $10 million or more a year, you pay a 70% rate. But that's not true. You don't pay 70% if you're making more than $10 million. You pay 70% on the money made after $10 million. So let's say you make $18 million a year. That doesn't mean that you're paying a 70% rate on all $18 million. That means you're paying whatever the rate is now, like 38 or something like that. That's the top number on your first $10 million. And then after the next $8 million that's made after the $10 million, that gets taxed at 70%, which is different. So that's the worst possible thing you could do as a moderator, to misrepresent the discussion, because now you have everything off of the rails and off of the set. You just described it wrong. You didn't describe it correctly, which is unacceptable. And then, obviously what you see is the founder of Dell doesn't know shit. He doesn't know anything. That's crazy. I can't believe that he doesn't know about marginal tax rates, and he doesn't know about the history of marginal tax rates. And boy, am I glad that professor jumped in and was like, the United States. Because it is true, again, and we have to keep saying this, that the marginal tax rates have been precedented for a long time to be up in those numbers. And I have the top marginal rates right in front of me. And the other problem I have with the moderator is the moderator goes briefly in the 80s, yes, as if like to give off this sort of look of I'm being a good moderator, but also being horrifically wrong. It wasn't brief, and it wasn't in the 80s. Hey, moderator, the 80s was when they started to come down, not when they were at their peak. That's when it started to come down. The Reagan years are when they started to come down. They started to come down in the 80s. It was decades of precedent for it being between, it was 63, top marginal tax rate in 1932 was 63%. And then in 1981, it was 69. And between then, it was between 63 and all the way up to 91. It was 91 for a long time. In fact, it was 92 in 52 and 53. For 51, it was 91%, 52, 92, 53, 92, and then 54, 55, 56, 57, 58, 59, 60, 61, 62, and 63. It was 91% top marginal tax rate. So, literally a decade of being in the 90s, more than a decade of being in the 90s. And again, let me repeat, between 32 and between 81, it was 69, and then 82 went down to 50, and then it started to go down from there. In 87, it went down to 38.50. So really, once the 80s hit, is when they started to take a shift away from those higher marginal tax rates. And granted, they still had 50 in 86, but 87, it was hit down to 38.50. And again, even 50 is a lot different than 91, and, the 70s that were in place. 70% was in for a long time through 71 to 80. It was 70%. So the fact that the moderator is a horrific moderator, and that really pissed me off for some reason. I don't even know if it should have triggered me this hard, but you're a moderator and you can't even get the basics right. So no, it wasn't briefly in the 80s, as you put it. In fact, it's totally false. Don't know anything. You don't know anything about U.S. history and taxation. And some of the best years, economically speaking, came from those times. So the idea that it's unprecedented, now should we go back to that solely on the merits of we had it before? No, that's not true. The point of bringing up that we had it before is A, that it's not something that's outlandish and socialist, because then that would imply that our country was socialist for decades upon decades, or a couple decades, not decades upon decades, but 2 to 4 decades, basically. You would deem it socialist, which is stupid. And then B is the idea that it's some catastrophic thing that wouldn't work when our economy actually was pretty darn good. And there were other factors, but, I don't think those top marginal tax rates should have gone down. I think they started to go down when you had the stagflation going on, but that had nothing to do with top marginal tax rates, so they shouldn't have brought those down. But anyways, you see how the crowd is laughing at the position of AOC. And it's something that pisses me off. It's not something that, they take it as a joke. They think it's a joke. They think it's funny. They think we're messing around. But they keep fucking around like this, that shit about to go to 90, dog. Like, I don't think they get it. I don't think they understand that the people are fed up. I don't think they understand that the people are done with this. And hopefully the dialogue will continue to shift, as it seems to be, because, again, as I've explained, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez not only has shifted the dialogue in terms of the Overton window, and she's did a lot better than Obama, by the way, but now there are a lot of people who are in favor of it. So we just saw a poll where it was a majority of people are in favor of a top marginal tax rate of 70%. So what you're looking at here is we are the majority. So they better be scared, because we're not taking this as some sort of a joke in any way, shape, or form. And I'm glad that the Professor Eric, dropped a clapback on the dumb Dell guy who doesn't know anything. It's just crazy. The dude's the founder of Dell. He didn't even know basic, historical tax knowledge. That's insane.